Good evening, my dear friends. I once again welcome you all to yet another learning session of Association of Veterinary Dermatology. We have with us Dr. Naresh Kumar Sood. Dr. Naresh Kumar Sood, as known to good number of people, has been associated with the field of pathology since long. He has an experience of 33 years at Gadwasu, teaching clinical pathology, oncology, general, systematic, and comparative pathology, has guided more than 11 MBSc students and 3 PhD students as a major advisor and a co-advisor to many, many more students. His research work has been entirely into pathology, diagnostic pathology, and animal disease and veterinary medicine. He has published more than 600 papers. He has been with more than 950 citations. He has a very big biodata, and he has also organized annual conference of Indian Association of Veterinary Pathology, has been also associated with Nepal vets for training them. He has been a ICR Best Teacher in 2017 and has an Outstanding Teacher Award in 1993. He has just retired recently after the creation of the pathology wing in the clinical complex of Gadwasu, and has been the primary mover in that aspect at Gadwasu. So he's going to enrich us on a practical approach for canine dermatology with special reference to otitis. I welcome you once again, wishing you Vijayadashmi, as well as let us overtake and diagnose the evil today in our dermatological affections with the help of Dr. Naresh Sood and have a better learning on clinical dermatopathology. Over to Dr. Sood for his sessions.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin, for giving an elaborate introduction. It has been really a wonderful time for me during all these webinars, and this is going to be another one, and I was in fact, when Dr. Nitin asked me, I was more than happy to do it. I am at the outset thankful to the Association of Veterinary Dermatology India and Dr. Nagarajan, its president, and the INTAS Animal Health, particularly Dr. Nitin Bhatia, who has been instrumental in organizing this seminar, as well as Dr. Manjot, who is the coordinating doctor. And I also wish everyone good evening and happy Vijayadashmi, and hopefully we would go on for a little longer. So the topic, as Dr. has said, is the otitis externa. So we are going to talk about dermatopathology. As I said, when we were talking about dermatopathology, then I looked at one article which was from PLOS ONE, recent article, and I was looking at it and I found that most common disease among the dermatological conditions was otitis externa. So the incidence of this disease is pretty high. According to several estimates, this is between 15 to 25% throughout world in dogs, and up to 40% in the tropical environment as ours. As you know, external ear is just an invagination of the dermis or epidermis, and it is just a part of the skin, except for that we have some modifications like ceruminous glands which are present. And whatever conditions they affect the skin, most of them they affect the ear too and can be correlated with the ear. Otitis would refer to an inflammatory condition of the ear, and it is a very non-specific thing which does not mean anything special or specific. It is related to so many conditions, so many factors which I am going to talk about. Since it is just a sign, therefore the primary or the underlying disease may be occluded, and we have to look for that, we have to search for that. There is no gender predilection, and the dogs between 5 to 8 years, they are more susceptible as per most of the literature. As I said, the external ear is just extension of the skin, and it's just going inside. Initially there are some hair follicles, and later on, and in some dog breeds there are more hair follicles, there are more hair, sometimes they are going into the ear canal. It's a L-shaped canal. First there is a vertical canal, then there is a bend, kink, and then it is horizontal canal, and then there is a tympanic membrane, which is a barrier. So supposing this barrier is broken, so infection can come from either side, from this side to this side, and from this side to this side as well, rarely. So that is really a problem, and that is also a way that exudate can accumulate there. That becomes also a problem. And there is a cartilage there is an oral cartilage which is there, and this cartilage sometimes can get affected, can get calcified, ossified. There can be calcifications elsewhere also which can interfere with the ear physiology. And here I'm showing you a little bit histology. This is just like epidermis, hair follicles, hair follicle, another hair follicle, sebaceous glands, and these are just like sweat glands. They are specialized apocrine glands. These are the ceruminous glands, which are specialized structures there. Since cerumen has a high lipid content, therefore it is not going to take any stain, and that's why it is a waxy substance, and on the slide it will interfere with the rest of the cells also. If there is too much cerumen, then we can't see on cytologic smear the cells clearly. That's another problem. So common signs of otitis externa would include head shaking, ear scratching, erythema of the ear, particularly when there is atopy or allergy or hypersensitivity reaction, which is one of the commonest factors for otitis externa. And the animal may feel pain when you try to massage the ears or manipulate them. There is also many a times a very foul odor coming out of the ear, and there can be discharge of different colors, which may also give you a clue what kind of otitis it is. Well, when we try to look at the etiopathogenesis of otitis externa, I told you it's already L-shaped dermoepidermal structure with follicles and ceruminous as well as sebaceous glands. Alterations in this structure can lead to microenvironmental or microbiome imbalance that can give rise to inflammation and consequent proliferation of either the commensals which are already present there, or inhabitant bacteria, or the foreign bacteria. Let us look at some of the basics. As I told you that it's a L-shaped structure. First there is a vertical structure and then there is a horizontal, and it's a kinky structure. That's why it can impair ventilation, and that may give rise to the proliferation of infectious agents. Vertical canal naturally impairs the drainage. The narrowing and bends in the canal always favor if there is a proliferation, there is a hyperplasia, there is a growth, then that will lead to stenosis of the canal at certain points. In some breeds of dogs, there are extra hairs which are present in the canal, and that can lead to obliteration of the canal more often. Some of the breeds too have the pendulous ears, which also affect the ventilation. The abundance, I told you, I showed you the picture. There were a lot of ceruminous and sebaceous glands. They, when incited, can produce excess of sebum or excess of cerumen. Together, they will bring in blockage of the canal. It's a relatively sealed compartment by a tympanic membrane, which I told you, and that both way, because that's very important for hearing if it is ruptured. But at the same time, that impedes the exudate there. Let us try to extend this etiopathogenesis. There are primary factors, there are secondary factors, there are perpetuating factors and predisposing factors. Let's look at them one by one. So primary causes, they affect when the ear is absolutely normal, and these are not under the control. But they can be looked after. They may be just certain causes which I'm going to talk about. The secondary causes are, once the primary cause is there, the secondary bacteria, the fungi, particularly the Malassezia or yeast, can infect, can take over the situation. The predisposing factors are those which are the inherent problems in the dog. I told you that ear canal anatomy, which increase the chance of the otitis externa. But they cannot do any disease of their own. They can't produce the disease of their own. But there's certainly certain breeds, certain animals, certain, if hormonal imbalance is there, or if there are certain other things, there can be predisposing factors, then, the disease is going to occur. Perpetuating factors come later on. Once the disease has set in, then the chronic changes are going to happen in the ear anatomy and physiology, which are going to damage the ear in a irreversible manner, which may fail to the chemotherapy or the medicinal therapy, and probably here only answer would be surgery. In the end, I'll be showing you two presentations, two thesis work which were done with my help in surgery and medicine, where we'll be talking about these. So let us briefly look at a picture which is showing all that whatever I have said in brief. So we have the primary causes, we have the secondary causes. So once primary cause comes in, the secondary causes automatically they take over. And then their associated predisposing factors, if already are there, then with time, maybe over months to years, this becomes a very irreversible chronic change, which is hard to treat. And that's the major problem about it. I'm going to talk over and over on this issue. So let us look at some of the primary causes, which are the actual causes of otitis externa in a normal year. Look, it is in a normal year. The year is absolutely normal. So these could be parasites like ear mites, demodicosis, pretty common in dogs, sarcoptic mange, rarely ticks, dermatophytes, Mycosporum canis, micro trichophyton, hypersensitivity. Allergies are very common causes for otitis externa. They start with the allergies, and particularly these food allergies. There can be environmental allergies. It has been seen that many of the cases, maybe a vast majority of cases, they start with the food allergies or allergies. Flea allergy, contact allergy, drug reaction, drug allergy, keratinization disorders like idiopathic seborrhea, abnormal cerumen production. These can also be there. Endocrine disorders, particularly hypothyroidism. You know, hypothyroidism weakens the immunity. Similarly, hyperadrenocorticism, that can also, and sometimes the sex hormone imbalance. Foreign bodies, because ear canal is a very tortuous thing, I told you just now. So naturally, when the dog is out, the plant material, particularly the plant seeds, grass awns, and sharp objects, they may get lodged. Hair, sand, hardened medications. Autoimmune disorders like pemphigus or lupus erythematosus. Glandular disorders, once, you know, in some breeds, the ceruminous, sebaceous or apocrine glands, they show hyperplasia. I'm going to show you pictures. Or even the cystomatosis or cyst development in the ceruminous glands that exposes benign tumors, ceruminous gland, adenoma, malignant tumors, adenocarcinoma, basal cell tumor, rarely histiocytoma, papilloma, squamous cell carcinoma, all can benign and malignant tumors naturally. They impede the canal and predispose to or become the primary causes of the otitis. Inflammatory polyps can also lead to the otitis. Primary otitis media is more common in certain breeds like brachycephalic breeds, which have a short neck and big head, like Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Idiopathic, where you can't identify any primary cause, you just dump it as idiopathic. Secondary causes contribute or cause disease only in an abnormal ear which has already having these problems. For example, bacteria, fungi or yeast. And the most common etiologies here are among the gram-positive are Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Enterococcus, and among the gram-negative are Pseudomonas, Proteus, Fungi and yeast, Malassezia is a very common cause, and there are several species, but about 90% of the cases are caused by one species, that is Malassezia pachydermatis. There can be Candida albicans. We have also seen Cryptococcus. So I'm going to show you some pictures now of the primary causative factors. So this is a allergic dog, and you can see on this side there it is reddening. Reddening or erythema always indicates allergy. Remember that. This is an example of Pemphigus foliaceus, and you can see those eruptions there. Puppy with a juvenile cellulitis, which disease generally develops suddenly in the puppies without any other dermatological involvement. It's primarily in the ear, and you would find like this. Ear mites, see it is scratching because of the irritation and pain, and ear mites can certainly be, and Demodex is one. You see, when you look at the normal skin, you have to look for many mites only then, because it could be a wandering mite. But in the ear, even if you find a few mites on ear cytology, it may be indicative of an etiology. Foreign bodies, I told you, these foreign material, particularly the grass seeds, grass awns, or other things, they can just stick in there and cause irritation and reddening and be primary causes. This is hypothyroidism related ceruminous otitis. So you can see there is a lot of cerumen there, there is a lot of thickening, and it always gives a black type of picture. When there is a glandular hyperplasia, particularly early glandular hyperplasia that narrows the canal at certain points where it is more, because it can be focal, it can be multifocal. Predisposing factors, when you talk about the confirmation of it is not actually under the control of the animal. Confirmation of the pinna, whether the pinna is hanging down or it is straight up, or what is the curvature of the pinna, what is the real shape of the pinna, that may matter according to breed and breed. Congenital stenosis sometimes can be seen. Excessive hair. I'll give you an example there. There is an example here. Cockapoo, excessive hair in the ear canal, and that predisposes, and can you see there's already a chronic otitis there and blocking of the canal. Similarly, certain breeds like Cocker Spaniel, German Shepherd, Poodle, Basset Hound, I'll show you in the end in our study, German Shepherd were affected. Excessive moisture, when the dogs tend to go into the water often, and in humans also, those who are swimmers, they suffer much more from otitis, because moisture and heat, they offer a good ambient condition for the proliferation of the yeast. Immunosuppression, several medications or maybe immunosuppressive diseases, particularly let us say some cancers or certain other underlying like systemic lupus erythematosus or pemphigus, they all predispose to or the otitis. Over treatment or excessive cleaning, because if you go on cleaning again and again, you are introducing a moisture, you are also damaging intricately the ear canal. Physical trauma can also be there. Respiratory, this is more in cats. Perpetuating factors are very, very important and have been discussed. You see, these are the pendulous ears. This is a swimmer dog. And perpetuating factors, when you talk about, there are progressive pathological changes, altered epithelial migration, proliferation. In fact, this recently it has been shown that there is a epithelial migration from the tympanic side, membrane side, towards the external side regularly, which is a inherent cleansing mechanism in humans, rats, and other species, including dogs. Now it has been documented in dogs as well. And because it is hindering that, so there is a proliferation of epithelium, there is hyperplasia of the glands, there is all that is going to occlude the canal. And finally, there may be a rigidity or calcification, which is really a problem. Otitis media, if it is there, that can extend into the external canal. It can be infectious, it can be sterile, it can be proliferative, it can be cholesteatoma, which is a sort of cyst where the debris is accumulated. It becomes a cystic structure just behind the tympanic membrane. Osteolysis, bony inflammation and damage to the bone, osteomyelitis. So all those they can expose to otitis externa. Abnormal tympanic membrane, supposing there is a scarring on it, opacity is there, thickening is there, diverticulum is there, rupture or inflammation, anything is there, that can always be a perpetuating factor and complicating the situation, existing situation, making it from reversible to irreversible, possibly now requiring just surgery and nothing else. We have already talked a little bit about the self-cleansing mechanism of the ear canal. I told you that the cells, they migrate from the tympanic membrane side towards the external auditory meatus regularly. That's how they bring in along with it the debris, the infectious material and other things. This is a common mechanism which is there, and even cerumen, excess cerumen. Disruption would lead to inflammation by the primary causes, and that will lead to flare up of the secondary infections in conjunction with predisposing factors and perpetuating factors. And finally, there is a chronic or recurrent inflammation resulting in progressive thickening of the epidermis, which is lining the ear canal, and increased secretion because of the continuous irritation. There is an increased secretion and retention of the cerumen, and that will favor the microbial growth. And this vicious cycle ultimately leads to thickening and thickening and thickening, further thickening, and fibrosis, calcification of the cartilages, and now the situation becomes difficult to treat. But this occurs over a long time, certainly. So I told you the perpetuating factors are really interesting. So these factors, they prevent the resolution of otitis and lead to relapse, even if the infection or the primary causes are no more. So means it's a self-perpetuating thing, like we have chronic active inflammation or a chronic inflammation. So there can be changes in the canal which like inflammation causing failure of the epithelial migration, acute change, edema, hyperplasia, chronic change, proliferative, chronic stenosis, calcification, fibrosis, all that is going to interfere and perpetuate the disease. Similarly, changes in the glandular tissue, hyperplasia of the ceruminous sebaceous glands, or inflammation there, that can all lead to the perpetuation. If there is otitis media, I already told you that is definitely be a perpetuating factor. So in nutshell, if we have to summarize in one slide, this is what here is. So edema, erythema, hot and humid, exudate, change in the epithelial lining, patency of the lumen, already told you, retention of exudate, favoring of overgrowth of microbes, particularly yeast. And yeast is a slow irritant. It's a very slow irritant. It's like a slow burning fire. What that does, that causes proliferation of the epithelium, glands, secretory material, and it becomes ultimately a vicious cycle. So if you look at what are the outcomes of otitis externa, it is a recurring problem, with time becomes irreversible and may require a total ear canal ablation, which I told you. For avoiding this, we have to understand the normal physiology and anatomy and how to restore that. And thus, it may require long-term management. I already told you it's multifactorial, so we don't know what are the primary factors. We don't know what are the secondary factors. We may know some predisposing factors, but perpetuating factors all have to be addressed in the longer race. The factors that interfere with the physiological function and anatomical structures make it very difficult. Ultimately, it becomes total failure of the ear anatomy and physiology that is difficult to resolve. And progressive otitis externa can finally damage the tympanic membrane and cross over to the media and may become otitis media and rarely otitis externa with the time. So this picture shows ceruminous gland hyperplasia. This is a mild hyperplasia, and look, slowly this mild hyperplasia becomes excessive hyperplasia. And see the canal here, the patency of the canal, and it is getting narrowed down, and ultimately it may become a full adenoma and you can't see the canal patency. Since cytology has been my field, so I would be stretching upon this very much in the context of otitis externa. And we have been doing this work for last 10 years, and every day I was getting some samples from the clinicians to look into what is the etiology, what is the situation. So otic cytology is a gold standard, in fact, now, but it has been very less employed in veterinary practice, even in the Western world, what to talk about India. And it may give you an idea about what is the etiology, best idea. I'll show you some slides, how to compare between the microbial culture and cytology. And thus, for ear, the best therapy is always a topical therapy for the otitis externa rather than a systemic therapy. So exudates can be smeared onto the slide. If you want to look for mites, you have to use the mineral oil. The most commonly found coccoid bacteria are the Staphylococcus pseudointermedius and Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is gram negative. This is gram positive, this is a rod. This is a cocci round, and these are the rods, small rods. Similarly, there can be Proteus. Similarly, there can be E. coli. Similarly, here there can be Streptococcus or Enterococcus. Malassezia is one of the commonest culprit in otitis externa. It is important to describe the presence of any inflammatory or neoplastic cells, as well as quantify each type of bacteria and yeast per high power. You have two ways: either you can count them roughly at 40x or oil immersion fields, and there are different laboratories or different institutions using different standards. It has been seen in one of the study that if you find more than 25 Malassezia per dry field 40x, then that is really a typical infection, because Malassezia is also a commensal there, is already there, but their numbers matter. If the number goes beyond 25, that may be there. And if at 100x it is more than 5, it is also considered as a culprit. Leukocytes, I told you that in ear the inflammation is not that profound as it is in the skin. It is a very subtle inflammatory change which is going on. It's a very slow irritational mechanism. Therefore, you hardly find many leukocytes there. If the leukocytes are there, that means something abnormal, something precarious is going on in the ear. So let us look at the cytology. So how to take the cytology sample? You have to insert a cotton tip swab into the ear. Sometimes if it is too dry, you have to moisten it with sterile saline, and then you have to smear it onto the slide in a rotatory motion. Never do like this, just move it like this. And on the same slide, you can make two smears. One, it's always advisable to take from the, even if one ear looks to be infected, you have to make the smears from both the sides for comparison's sake. For example, here this is blackish material, maybe more chronic change, and here it is more whitish, maybe there are more cells, maybe there is some pus or neutrophils. So idea is already there, and you can look at. So for example, on the right side we have the right ear, on the left side of the slide we have the left ear, and because of this fenestration on the slide, you can identify which is right, which is left. So always use this kind of slides, otherwise it may be difficult, or you have to mark it. And then you can stain it with Romanowski type of stains. Among the Romanowski stains, the best stains work are the combination stains like Wright Giemsa or Wright Leishman combination. But we have been successfully doing the Leishman staining, which is pretty nice, and I'm going to show you pictures from our own work towards the end. So the type of inflammatory cells, I told you, if they are there, that means there is a problem. If there are neutrophils, it could be bacteria, even a few neutrophils. They may be indicative immune-mediated disease, tissue injury, eosinophils. There can be fungal, allergic, hypersensitivity, ectoparasites, protozoa, some neoplasms like mast cell tumors, I'm going to show you a picture of a mast cell tumor in the ear. Eosinophils in combination with neutrophils, if the neutrophils plus eosinophils are there, that may suggest frunculosis or hair fall. In fact, when otitis is there, the hair density also changes, it is decreased. Because this keratin and hair shafts, they become foreign bodies in the canal and they may incite inflammation. Lymphocytes or plasma cells, if they are there, it can be indicative of chronic disease or immune mediated reaction. Macrophages always would indicate a chronic inflammation, which may be incited by fungi or higher form of bacteria, sometimes Corynebacterium or cystic lesions they may suggest. So we can have direct techniques or we can have aided techniques with the help of otoscope, the collection of material. So direct techniques would include collection of the oral exudate by cotton tipped method, and here you always take from left and right ears and try to, and if you want to do for the parasites, you can use some mineral oil because you see unstained mostly these preparations. Using mineral oil would dissolve the keratin. There is a lot of keratin there. I'm going to show you some pictures also. Another, if it is visible to the external or on the external ear pinna or somewhere near, you can make a direct smear. Particularly when the lesion is ulcerated, you can make a smear. Impression smear can also, or this is for impression smear, in fact, whatever I was talking. So scraping can also be done if you suspect some mites, then you can do the scraping of the skin or fungus or the fungus, even like Candida or like Malassezia. The scraping may also, but this is only on the external surfaces which are visible. You can do it, but inside it's not possible. Fine needle aspiration, when you see a nodule somewhere, you can always go a fine needle aspiration and you can take up the material onto the slide and look for it. This is what I wanted to show you, and it's really surprising and fascinating. So comparison of ear cytology with microbial culture. See, the cytology results are immediate, and in culture the results, they take minimum 48 to 72 hours. In some cases, tedious organisms, it may be week or more, or even several weeks. Sensitivity for yeast is very high here. Just looking at the yeast numbers, I told you examples, I'll show you more examples, and in culture is low. Sensitivity for bacteria too is quite high. Here it's not. In fact, if you see the bacteria engulfed within the neutrophils or macrophages, that's a much better way of demonstrating the bacterial etiology rather than if you try to isolate them. Sensitivity for leukocytes, certainly you can see leukocytes, you can't see there. So when you see leukocytes along with bacteria or yeast, it is certainly an inflammation. Estimation of numbers is a semi-quantitative thing, is a subjective thing. If you are careless, you may miss. And here it is certainly a better, more refined or organized data. Rank significance and mixed infections. Cytology, certainly you can rank, but here you can't. So you can different both the ears. If it is there, you can say this side is mild, this side is moderate, this side, right side is severe. So here you can't do that. You will only say this bacteria is the agent. Monitor response to therapy. Yes, you can do it repeatedly. Here you will not be doing it repeatedly and is expensive too. And here you can't determine the antimicrobial resistance. That's a very positive thing in the culture, which you can't do here. But certainly we know that which antibiotic is effective against which organism, which we can try accordingly. People also tried two swabs, one let us say today and one another day next day, and try to see is there a correlation. Yes, it's very consistent. What was found was on 151 years of dogs with otitis externa, it was found that reproducibility for cytology in otitis externa was excellent. And that's why a second sample is not required. Just one sample is enough. So this Ontario State University that has made a semi-quantitative scale at 100x oil immersion fields. So they can talk about organisms, particularly bacteria, if there are occasional. That is, if it is 1 plus, then 6 to 10. If it is 2 plus, then it should be 11 to 20. If it is 3 plus, it's 21 to 30. And if it is 4 plus, the organism should be 31 to 40. And this is an approximate or estimate. And if there are too numerous to count, that means it's a massive thing. So this scale or semi-quantitative scale helps you in classifying or helps you in grading the otitis. And this is the kind of performer which is available, on which we can devise this very simply. Left ear cytology, right ear cytology, how many E's, whether no or yes, estimated number 40x or 100x. And right ear similarly, whether they are rods or cocci or mixed or whatever, how many of them are there, phagocytosis is there or not. So all that indicates. For Malassezia and bacteria, certain criteria have been devised world over, and this is a more recognized, accepted criteria which I am going to show you. So in the dog, if the Malassezia are less than 2, it is a normal ear. If there are 3 to 4, it's intermediate. If it is more than 5, it's abnormal. If bacteria less than 5 or up to 5, that's normal. If 6 to 24, if above 25, that's abnormal. And this is at 100x. So now let's look at some cytology pictures. So here you can see neutrophils, and probably this is some fibrin, and these are the staphylococci. Why staphylococci? They are like bunches of grapes of rods. So that's staphylococci. And what is this? This is on a squamous epithelial cell, the melanin granules. Don't confuse, they are not bacteria, they are melanin, they are more blackish, they are smaller, and they are usually seen when there is a secondary acanthosis or blackening of the ear, as I showed you. So naturally there is a acanthosis nigricans, or there is a darkening of the skin or lichenification of the skin. And here you can see degenerated neutrophils, and they have engulfed staphylococci. Look. So that makes it a sure shot etiology. There is no way any culture can do, because in culture you may get unwanted 1-2 bacteria which may proliferate, and the real bacteria may not be cultured. And this is an example of Pseudomonas. Rather, this is a mixture of organisms. Here there are mixture of organisms. There are cocci, there are longer organisms, there are bacilli, small thin bacilli, there are cocci, large number of cocci. So all kind of bacteria. In fact, here Streptococcus canis, Staphylococcus pseudointermedius, Corynebacterium, they were all isolated. And this is about the yeast, the Malassezia, which looks like footprints or chappal, and if there are more than 5 at 100x, that indicates that this is the typical infectious organism. Sometimes Pseudomonas otitis occurs, and Pseudomonas has been reported to be the only agent which produces a typical neutrophilic response in the ear. Although others may also produce, but most commonly when you see neutrophils and the small rods, you may think about otitis caused by Pseudomonas. So here you can see inflammation, edema, erythema, hyperplasia, stenosis, and purulent exudate. Everything you can see, the exudate is also there in the vertical ear canal. So all those things with the help of otoscope you can see. And this is the Pseudomonas. So you can see small rods and you can identify it as easily. You don't need to, you can easily identify streptococci, you can easily identify staphylococci, you can easily identify E. coli, you can easily identify Pseudomonas. There is nothing difficult in it. So now I'm going to show you some studies in which I was involved over the several years. I was involved in several otitis studies, 3-4, out of which I have picked 2, one from the medicine department, another from the surgery department, because there is a difference in approach. So here the total animals were 130, diseased cases 115, healthy control 15. And if you look at this study, the main component of otitis was bacterial otitis, followed by the fungal, in which Malassezia was the dominant partner. Then interestingly, the mysis, the maggots, which has been less reported. One case of puppy strangles and 5 cases of oral tumors they were reported. And here also you see, although in our clinic the predominance, there is a predominance of the Labrador breed. We have a lot of Labradors in Punjab, and in the clinics also, if there are 100 dogs, let us say about 50 are just lab. But look, the incidence of this is more in the German Shepherd. As I told you, this breed is more predisposed to the infection. Similarly, the age group, when we look at, it was 1 to 5 years, which was, I told you, 4 to 8 years group. So where there were maximum number of cases. And as the dogs become aged, they become less susceptible, but they become more susceptible to chronic otitis and tumors. Seasonal prevalence, the more prevalence was in heat and humid or in the summer and rainy seasons rather than in the winter. So here we are looking at the bacterial otitis externa, And the clinical signs, the pus was noted. Out of 70 cases of bacterial otitis were reported, and out of that, pus was seen in 42, hyperemia in 47, excess wax in 28, stenosis in 6. That's an important finding. And tympanic membrane was visible in many of these cases. So here, if you look at the cytological findings, we had keratinocytes and keratin fragments in 70 cases out of 115, mixed bacterial population in 8, and single bacteria, only one kind of bacteria, in 62 cases. And mixed is more complicating sometimes. Malassezia along with the bacteria was also found in 12, and degenerated neutrophils to a lesser extent in some and to a greater extent in others, they were found. Some of them have already had also engulfed bacteria in 20 cases. So now you can see that there are mainly cocci and some bacilli, and the neutrophils are totally degenerated. So that's a sort of sepsis. That is sort of pus, which is in pus or sepsis, this kind of picture will be there. This is another where the neutrophils are more preserved, and this is yet another where neutrophils are preserved, and you can see small cocci or some bacilli. This is another where you can see mixed bacteria, and here there are a lot of keratin fragments. There is huge number, indicates hyperkeratinization or epithelial hyperplasia. So bacterial isolation, when we did, we found Staphylococcus coagulates positive in 22 cases, Staphylococcus coagulase negative in 13 cases, Proteus in 16 cases. Those were the main bacteria which were isolated. But at the same time, 2 bacteria were also isolated, Staphylococcus along with Proteus, Staphylococcus along with E. coli in 8 cases. That's interesting. I showed you the pictures, and you can see the isolation also shows 2 kind of bacteria. And hematology in the bacterial otitis was certainly informative because we had TLC, we had a leukocytosis. So the variation was pretty big. Can you see 23,496 plus minus 2,178. So there was a marked leukocytosis along with absolute neutrophilia. See, 18,000 is a big number. It's beyond range of the TLC. So what happens? There is a severe neutrophilic leukocytosis. So naturally, when ear canal is having bacterial infections, when it is having pus in several cases, and maybe those cases are not outnumbering, but sometimes the TLC may go too much. So that will disrupt the whole thing, whole average, and naturally you will get a average neutrophilic leukocytosis. And the drug of choice came out to be enrofloxacin, followed by this ciprofloxacin. Fungal otitis externa. So we had the Malassezia number 1 as it is. So you can see in 22 cases the Malassezia was found. Aspergillus was found in 4. Candida was found in 3. Cryptococcus was found. This is rare. I see Cryptococcus in some cases. At least I have seen 10, 15 cases where along with Malassezia, Cryptococcus, and this has been less reported rather. And you can see this is a thickening and folding or lichenification along with erythema, along with, secondary acanthosis nigricans, blackening. And here you can see thickening. And here, if you compare the counts of Malassezia, they were about 48 or 49 average, which is very high as compared to the normal cases at 40x, and that's certainly tremendously high. And there is a significant difference in the infected compared to the normal. And here you can see bacteria as well as Malassezia. It is a broad-based bud, whereas Cryptococcus is more pleomorphic, larger, having a thick capsule and a narrow base budding. And this is the number of Malassezia, exaggerated, too many of them. Certainly it's an etiology here. And you can't see much of there is this material which is rather glassy or which is occluding the things, that is the wax or the cerumen. It was interesting that in the pure mycotic where there were no bacteria along with, there was just relative neutrophilia. Whereas where the fungal and bacterial infections were together, there was neutrophilic leukocytosis. So that also would be giving you an idea on hematology. Mysis could be ear mysis or oral mysis. And you can see those. There are numerous. You can see those. And see it's how soiled this ear is. And this is on the further otoscopy. So when we try to summarize hematology, because I have interest in hematology and we were doing that hematology for all the cases, and here you can see bacterial dermatitis is significantly very important, and the TLC, and for the fungus plus bacteria again is important, but rest of them it is almost within range. So that will also indicate you and indirectly a corroborative evidence for the kind of infection that is happening in the ear. Let us look some ear tumors in this study. So we had 5 tumors which were there. One was ceruminous, rather 2 were ceruminous gland adenocarcinomas, 2 were melanomas, and 1 was a squamous cell carcinoma plus adenoma. 2 tumors in the same case. It can happen. See, remember, chronic inflammation now has become a hallmark of tumor progression or formation or initiation. So once chronic inflammation sets in, there is always a chance of making it from hyperplasia to metaplasia to dysplasia to carcinoma in situ and finally invasive carcinoma or tumor development. It can also incite sarcomas. So here, this is an example where you can see the tumors, and that's going deep, and this is more of it. This is a melanoma. This is a picture of a melanoma. Can you see a lot of melanin laden cells which indicate, and some of them have less melanin, which indicates it's a melanoma. And this is an in situ tumor, in situ adenocarcinoma. See, this gland is markedly dilated, this ceruminous gland, and there is a projection into it, which is an early tumor that is arising. I told you how the tumors develop. They go through phases: hyperplasia, dysplasia, carcinoma in situ. That's what is the example. And later on, it may become a full-fledged invasive car. This is more of an invasive tumor. See now the tumor, multiple layering of this gland. There is hardly any cytoplasm, nuclei are overlapping, and they are getting out of the frame of the gland. They are breaking the basement membrane barriers and they're coming out, and that means it is now invasive carcinoma. So that was the first study I wanted to show you. The next study is surgery study, in which 22 cases were taken, and in group 1 there were 16 cases where the otitis was not responsible to medical therapy, because surgery, they will refer to surgery only when it is chronic or nearly irreversible. There was less hyperplasia in these cases, or those with some neoplastic small lesions in the vertical canal. And in these cases, they adopted an older procedure, what is known as lateral ear canal resection. In the second group, these 6 dogs were chosen. They had more severe reactions. They had calcifications, ossifications, severe thickening or occlusion of the ear canal, and here the total ear canal ablation along with the lateral bulla osteotomy were done. So this is regarded as a better procedure than this one. So you can see a normal ear canal and see there is ulceration, and now there is a growth and occlusion of the canal. And these are some of the radiographs which have been taken from there. And you see on radiography, if you go through this ear canal, there is a lot of opacities indicating that there are mineralizations, there are thickenings, there are the opaque tissue densities. And here on contrast radiography, when you introduce a contrast material, you can see that on this side, this is going up to here. But on this side, because of the rupture, it is going into the bulla. Look at that. Another radiograph, and here there is a marked change in the ear canal on a plain radiograph, along with calcifications or mineralization. And upon contrast radiography, you can still see it is not going further, it's just stopping here. So that means the canal is totally occluded. It's not reaching the tympanic membrane. So if you summarize these findings, there was stenosis of the canal in 22 cases, all cases. Increased opacity of the tympanic bulla, 19 cases. Calcification or mineralization, 17 cases. Soft tissue densities, 14 cases. Bilateral disease, 8 cases. Tympanic membrane integrity, if you look at, that was intact only in 4 cases. Unilateral perforation was seen in 2 cases, bilateral perforation in 3, could not be evaluated in this 1 case. Prognosis in group 2 was much better than the group 1. I told you that technique does not work as well as the total ear canal ablation works. Improved prognosis because it is a milder disease. In a sometimes that may be less, so naturally here the improved prognosis and poor prognosis certainly was there also in this group, as I told you. So when we try to look at the things in a lesion score manner, see what we did when we did the histopathology. We tried to score whether how much is the thickening of the epithelium or acanthosis is there, how much is the hyperkeratinization, how thick is the keratin layer, how much glandular hyperplasia. So a paper came in 2015 where they made a lesion score. Earlier it was not there. So for histopathology, and they said for normal ear this is the lesion score or ranking. And dogs with otitis had much more lesions or much more severe score or ranking. For example, epidermal hyperplasia was 1.8, almost double of that. Hyperkeratosis also much more. Ceruminous gland hyperplasia also significant. Ceruminous gland atrophy also see much more. Okay, the ceruminous gland hyperplasia, that is also much more. Sebaceous gland hyperplasia, that's also almost triple. These three are more than triple. Sebaceous gland atrophy, density of hair follicles. The hair follicles here in the normal ear, I told you, they are more, so their number is reduced. There is a frunculosis, fibrosis, much more. Inflammation certainly there. So these are some of the pictures. You can see this canal is almost occluded, and this canal also is not very patent. And these are some of the pictures which show the histopathology. Very little histopathology has been done on the ear. So here you can see much more thickening of the epidermis, particularly the middle layers, the stratum spinosum, and you can see keratin is also there, and underlying chronic inflammation. There is acanthosis here, and this was multiple times thickened as compared to normal. If you compare here there is much less thickening as compared to here. It's multiple times. And that's why once it is thickened, once inflammation is here, fibrosis is there, that will project as a sort of papilliform or a nodular projection, which will interfere with the canal. And here you can see ulceration. The epithelium is gone. Here the epithelium is there. Here the epithelium, and it is becoming a pitted ulcer and going deep. And here it shows the ceruminous gland hyperplasia. Here the cells and dilatation. And here it shows a cystic dilatation of the ceruminous gland. And naturally that is also the flow of the cerumen is not there, is occluded because of the inflammation. Ducts, the apocrine ducts, they have been blocked. And this shows excessive sebaceous gland, lot of sebaceous glands there, much more than normal. And this is a perivascular inflammation of mononuclear cells around the vessel, what we call as perivasculitis. This is a typical hypersensitivity reaction. Here in this picture, there is pavementing of the neutrophils. The neutrophils are trying to move out of the small venules or vessels, and this is indicative too for inflammation. And this is a myxomatous degeneration within the fibrous tissue, old fibrous tissue undergoes myxomatous degeneration. So naturally that indicates a chronic change. And this is yet another, this is cartilage, and this cartilage is becoming ossified or calcified, which is also a predisposing factor to a perpetuation of the disease. And this is a ceruminous gland adenocarcinoma. Can you see the nuclei? They're highly pleomorphic. Some are pretty small, some are moderately sized, some are huge, and they're very open type. So this is a typical solid ceruminous gland adenocarcinoma. And this is a mast cell tumor. There are a large number of mast cells. Some of them are not staining because they have less granules, they become more primitive due to cancer, or anaplasia is there. So with that, I try to end here, and I'm extremely thankful. I'm extremely thankful to the INTAS people, the INTAS Animal Health, for providing me this opportunity, particularly to Dr. Nitin Bhatia and my student Dr. Amanjot, and I am also thankful to the Association of Veterinary Dermatology India, Dr. Nagaraja. I didn't see him, probably he is now there. And I am also thankful to all the participants who might have participated in this, because of this Sunday. I know is a relaxing day, but still people are coming up, and they have come up for listening. And once again, I wish you a very good evening and happy Vijayadashmi. Thank you very much.
Dr. Nagaraj, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Nitin,
Yes, sir.
any questions?
Yeah, questions are there, sir. I thought you want to speak, so
Yeah,
we'll come to you just after the question, sir.
yeah, please.
Sir, we have questions for you.
No problem.
Now, we know that our association is more so association of practicing veterinarians. So number of questions are from the practicing vets. And we have told them that you are a pathologist, you work more on cytology, but still there are some clinical questions. I'll put across the pathological questions to you, sir.
Thank you.
How do we differentiate between E. coli and Pseudomonas as a clinician, sir?
Okay. Oh, that's a very good question. Pseudomonas is pretty short, okay. E. coli is pretty long, the chains are pretty long, and you can easily differentiate. E. coli is a very versatile bacteria. You see it forms well, let us look in the urine. Urine, it forms long chains, and even elsewhere also, if you look at the ear, it is forming longer chains, and it's certainly longer. It's one of the longest bacilli that you see. That's how you can differentiate it. Okay, of course, the cultural techniques are also there added to that, where you can do the culture and try a differential culture. And the test can be done.
Right, sir. Another question is that we have talked about pus, we have talked about the ear infections. A common question comes from a clinician is, before every eye drops, we are suggested to clean the ear? Is it a requirement pathologically? How do you justify it as a pathologist? What are your comments on that?
See, I think more than a pathologist, the clinician knows where the shoe pinches, how much is the pus, how much is the exudate there, how much is the situation, clinical situation. According to that, naturally, if the situation is worse, you have to clean it. Okay, but supposing it is a mild situation, you may not need to clean it. That and repeated cleaning, I told you, will cause more problems. If you go on cleaning and cleaning, you are making it abrasive, and probably that is going to cause more inflammation and more chronicity later on. And too much use of cleaning or antibiotics, that is also not advisable. It may predispose to fungal infections as well. Steroid and antibiotic overuse will certainly lead to more complications later on.
Sir, as a pathologist, any ear cleaner that you recommend?
I think I'll divert this question to you or Dr. Nagaraja.
Okay. Can a small number of ear mites give a clinical? What is the numbers that? Because you talked about melasthesia being 5 and more. So, what are the number of ear mites that we should look at and correlate with the disease condition?
Yeah, ear mites. When you, I have experience with the Demodex. Okay, and I have experience with the Sarcoptes. Okay, but in ear usually there is hardly less. There is less of Sarcoptes, and there can be Demodex. But I feel personally, although when you see number of Demodex mites, that is quite enough, and some of them are mature, others are immature. They are in different phases of growth. Then we say that it is certainly the infection. But in ear, I feel if it is a deep ear and you find some mites that may be infective, of course, you have to go with the clinical findings as well. But that mite is certainly will be more disturbing in the ear. Even a few mites in the ear would be much more disturbing than elsewhere on the skin, because that's a foreign body, and you know how much irritation is there if something goes, any insect or anything goes into the ear, that's highly irritating.
True, sir. The next question again is more clinical in nature. Uh, Looking into, well, I think that you don't have the answer for it, but still I'm putting it forward in case you, by experience, you can answer something. By looking at the pus color, can we diagnose a causative bacteria? Is there some correlation?
Yeah, certainly there is a correlation. If there is a greenish type of material coming out, then that could be Pseudomonas. Okay, there can be different. For example, there can be yellowish if it is E. coli. It can be, of course, it's not always 100% correlatable, but certainly the color of the pus matters to a certain extent.
Sir, with the span of time, we are observing otitis even in buffaloes. So, any short and crisp recommendations for buffaloes? Because people don't want to spend much on buffalo, especially in terms of otitis. So, any broad outlines for that?
When we are exerting the animal to too much production, you have that production stress, and you have so many things which may come up in with the passage of time. You see the diseases which we never saw, they are coming up in
Yeah,
cattle and buffalo.
true, sir. True, true. That brings us to the end of the clinical pathology questions, sir. We have left a few questions which are fully clinical in nature, and we'll try to address to the particular people directly on emails. So we thank you on behalf of Association of Veterinary Dermatology and to sum it up, I'll take the privilege of giving the dais to Dr. Nagarajan, who is the president of Association of Veterinary Dermatology, to close this session. Sir, over to you.
Good evening to everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you very much, sir, Dr. Nageshu. You have given a very wonderful lecture on diabetes, particularly the cytology. Actually, in dermatology, if you see, skin scraping and cytology are the very important things, like two eyes for diagnosis of dermatology issue.
You are not audible.
So that's why we wanted to have a thing on tonight. And I thank you very much for your nice presentation. And I thank our mentors for helping us, everyone, for this wonderful thing.
Thank you very much, all of you, once again.
Thank you to all. We are coming to the close of the session. We thank everyone for spending your time on the eve of the Shara and being with us for a knowledgeable session from Dr. Soni. We thank each one of them for being a participant and participating in this webinar. Thank you all, sir. We are closing this session. Thank you.